Stockholm, the 30th of April 2026. Cars pull up in front of the royal palace, one after the other. Doors open, uniforms step out, decorations catch the camera lights. On the steps, queens, presidents, grand dukes, and former monarchs. Disappear into the palace, people who no longer command armies and who are still arranged by rank. Then a girl steps into view, 14 years old. No crown, no political office. And yet this evening, one of the most important places in Sweden's future belongs to her. Princess Estelle walks behind her mother, Crown Princess Victoria, into the Hall of State. Around her, women wear diamonds that have outlasted revolutions, exiles, wars, and vanished empires. Officially, this is the 81st birthday of her grandfather, King Carl XVI Gustaf. But that is only the surface. What this evening really shows is how monarchy survives once it no longer rules. Sweden is not a courtly stage set. It is a parliamentary democracy. The king forms no government. He sets no agenda. He is not a monarch who dismisses ministers or dictates laws. And yet this evening, kings, queens, presidents, heirs to thrones, grand dukes, and representatives of former ruling houses gather inside the Stockholm palace. That is the contradiction. Carl Gustaf does not rule. But everyone comes. The question is not whether this king holds power. The question is more precise. What remains of power once it has officially disappeared? Carl Gustaf Folke Hubertus is born on the 30th of April, 1946. Europe still lies in the shadow of the war. New states are emerging. Some crowns disappear forever. When Carl Gustaf takes the throne in 1973, he is 27 years old. Young, watched, inexperienced, and king of a country that no longer understands its monarchy as rule. His motto reads, "For Sweden with the times." It sounds polite, almost harmless, but this is precisely the survival program of the modern crown. Because shortly after the start of his reign, the constitutional framework of the Swedish monarchy is finally modernized. The king remains head of state. But real governing power lies with the government and the Riksdag. So Carl Gustaf has to learn something that would have been almost unthinkable for earlier kings: to retain meaning while giving up power. On April 30th, 2026, it becomes visible how well this formula works. From Belgium come King Philippe and Queen Mathilde. From Denmark, King Frederick and Queen Mary, along with Queen Margrethe and Princess Benedicta. Norway is represented by King Harald, Queen Sonja, and Crown Prince Haakon. From Luxembourg come Grand Duke Guillaume and Grand Duchess Stephanie. From Liechtenstein, hereditary Princess Sophie and Prince Joseph. Wenzel from Thailand, King Maha Vajiralongkorn, and Queen Suthida. The representation from Spain and the Netherlands stands out. Not the reigning monarchs come, but their mothers, Queen Sophia and Queen Beatrix. Then Finland and Iceland, republican neighbors in a monarchic hall. And finally those houses whose political world has long since vanished: Romania, Serbia, Bavaria, Saxe-Coburg, and Gotha. Some of these people rule, some represent, some carry titles that today are mostly history. But in the Hall of State, all of them are translated into the same language for one evening, rank, proximity, origin, memory. This is the grammar of monarchy, and it still works, even when its political power has long been reduced. Anyone who sees this evening only as a display of jewels misses the point. Of course, the tiaras catch the eye first. The Braganza tiara on Queen Sylvia, the Connaught tiara on Crown Princess Victoria, diamonds, amethysts, emeralds, pearls, jewels that appear in royal magazines. But in the Hall of State, they are more than ornament. They are documents without paper. And they are not alone. Because the hall does not only speak through people, it also speaks through things. Above the guests hang the flags of all Swedish provinces. This is not decoration. It is a map of the country, The table of honor stands in the center. The king sits with the Queen of Norway and the Queen of Denmark. Queen Sylvia sits with the King of Norway and the King of the Belgians. The seating order alone tells of neighborhood, rank, and statecraft. And then the table itself. Glasses given to the royal couple in 1976 by the government and the Riksdag for their wedding. Porcelain from the time of Gustaf V and Queen Victoria. Plates that reach back to the middle of the 19th century. Cutlery that came with Queen Desiree from Paris to Sweden. Dessert cutlery that passed from Amélie of Brazil to Queen Josefina. Bronzes from Paris, acquired by Carl XIV Johann, which means before anyone gives a speech, the table itself already tells 200 years of history, and only then come the diamonds. Then Carl Gustaf says something that sounds almost casual. He speaks of a thought that came to him recently. As a small boy, he sat on the lap of King Gustaf V, and Gustaf V, in turn, had sat as a child on the lap of Queen Desiree, the wife of the first Bernadotte on the Swedish throne. Carl XIV Johann, a child on a lap, then another child, 2 touches, and more than 200 years of dynasty shrink to a single family gesture. This is the strongest scene of the evening, because it shows how monarchy tells itself, not as a constitutional article, not as a claim to power, not even as a political program, but as a chain. One body remembers another, one generation touches the next. History is not explained, it is passed on. But that is only one side, because this evening, Crown Princess Victoria also speaks. Not only as a daughter, but as the queen to come. She speaks of service, of responsibility, of duty. And the same image appears in her words too, the next link in the chain. With this, the evening shifts. What begins as a look back at an old king turns quietly into a moment of handover. Carl Gustaf looks back as far as Desiree. Victoria looks ahead. And Estelle sits in the room, 14 years old, not yet a full bearer of the symbol, but visible enough that everyone understands. The chain does not end here. There is no need to imagine this moment as great drama. No new era is proclaimed, no law is announced, no crown is placed. That is precisely why the scene is so precise. Trumpeters sit on the gallery. At the table of honor, Nordic monarchies, European royal houses, Republican. Heads of state and families whose thrones are long since history meet one another. Queens wear stones older than some constitutions. Decorations hang from shoulders whose political meaning has vanished. Their visual power has remained. And in the center sits a man who does not rule Sweden. That is the contradiction. Carl XVI Gustaf cannot bring down a government. He cannot enforce a law. He cannot act like the kings whose silver and porcelain are being eaten from this evening. But he can do something modern politics rarely can. He can make a line visible, not a parliamentary term, not a headline, but duration. And in this lies the quiet power of the evening. The group photograph is therefore more than a memento. It is a claim. These institutions are still here. They decide less, they no longer rule, but they have survived. Of course, one can see this evening differently, as courtly theater, as a luxury ritual. This criticism is not trivial, because monarchy lives on public consent, even though it is not elected. It must seem old enough to carry meaning, and modern enough not to seem absurd. This is exactly what Carl Gustaf's motto describes. For Sweden, with the times. The 80th birthday showed how difficult this balance is. In the morning, flowers from children. At noon, the Volvo that had been given to him for his 50th birthday. A car, from the year of his own birth. In the evening, Desiree's cutlery, Bernadotte history, tiaras, decorations, provincial flags, and a 14-year-old princess in the hall. This is not a coincidental sequence. This is a staging of continuity. A king turned 80, a hall stood full of crowns, and no one was crowned. And perhaps that was exactly the point. Because sometimes power shows itself not in giving orders, but in the fact that everyone still knows where they are supposed to sit.